Well, hello, With Gratitude Matt listeners. My name is Matt Moran, and I'm the host for the With Gratitude Matt show. Our goal with this show is to inspire our listeners to practice gratitude, regardless of how powerful their storm is. I've learned that the practice of gratitude works much like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it becomes. I'm so grateful to have today's guest on the show. Today's guest is Jonathon Sams. He and his wife, Julie, have raised 4 children. Today, Jonathon has his own law practice in Cincinnati, Ohio, and he has plenty of experience in walking through the cancer journey that he's been on for over 40 years. He first was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 14, had another bout with it at age 39, and then most recently at the age of 55, dealt with it again. He is truly an amazing inspiration to so many and has such energy for life, and you'll feel that through the interview today. While he was in cancer treatment most recently, he walked an entire marathon while being hooked up to his chemo treatments while being in the hospital for 5 consecutive days. So it gives me great gratitude to welcome Jonathon to the show. Welcome to the show, Jonathon.
Thank you, Matt. It's nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Well, while we get started, Jonathon, and we'll certainly talk about the marathon that you walked in the hospital, but I mentioned you've had 3 bouts with cancer, and I'd love to hear your perspective on what you know about cancer today and how you most recently prepared yourself for the recovery journey that you're on today.
Well, as you said, I've had 3 bouts with cancer. The first one I was 14 years old when I was diagnosed. I actually was 12 when I got it. We just didn't realize. And so the cancer grew in me for 2 years. That was nodular sclerosing Hodgkin's disease. And at that time, at 12, I got out of the pool and went up, and my mom felt under my left jaw, and she felt something that she thought was swimmer's ear. But that just continued to grow until it had grown to a point where it was 13 centimeters by 9 centimeters by 6 centimeters. The tumor was big enough that I could pull it out from under my jaw and put it on the outside of my jaw. And I finally asked Mom if it could be removed for aesthetic reasons, because I was a teenager with this growth on me. And she said yes. The story is that the surgeon, as soon as he opened me up, began swearing in the operating room because he realized what it was. I was in stage 3. My prognosis was poor. And for a year, I had chemotherapy and radiation therapy and surgeries. During that time, I learned a lot. Usually you don't see kids with cancer, but when you are a kid with cancer, they house you with kids with cancer. And so you see a lot of them. And you know that some of you are going to live and some of you are not going to live. And that first time, it's like getting out of a burning house. Everybody's trying to get out. And you know that some of you are going to make it out and some of you aren't. And so from a very young age, you're dealing with this. You're losing your hair. You're gaining weight. You're losing weight. They're putting permanent tattoos on you. And then you have people younger than you who are passing away, and you go to their funerals. And so at that point, you realize you become aware of mortality early, and you become aware that life is short, and you better make use of it. And there's a lot of other things that go along with that we'll probably get in later. But that's kind of my first experience with cancer, and I think it's defined my life to a great degree also. And I think putting our feet under us is this also. Growing up, my dad was a preacher. My mom was a preacher's wife. She would read Bible stories to us at night. And one of the stories she read to me was the story of Solomon. And when Solomon became king of Israel, God said, I'll give you anything you want, anything at all. And Solomon prayed for wisdom. And so God gave him wisdom. I thought that was a really great prayer. And so at age 9 or 10, before cancer ever came, I prayed for wisdom, and God gave me cancer. And you see, I don't think that cancer has ever been a curse to me. I think cancer has always been a blessing to me. Cancer has been the answer to prayer to me. I didn't think it was at the time necessarily, but you can't have wisdom without experience. And so whatever happens in our life, I think we have the opportunity to use it for good. And I think that whatever the storm that is happening, that we need to submit ourselves to the storm and learn how to use those things to benefit other people.
Well, you're certainly a testament that you've had plenty of storms, but you've gotten much stronger as a result of those storms. And I actually just listening to you tell your story about you as a 14-year-old kid, I literally got goosebumps just hearing you talk about the permanent tattoos because I have some of those permanent tattoos as well. I never thought I'd have them, but I do, and I wear them proudly because
Yep,
without
that's
them,
right.
they wouldn't be able to do the treatments that they're doing on me. And it's amazing at the advancements that we've seen. And you've been dealing with cancer for, you know, uh, almost 40 years. Um, but they've made huge and wild advancements
Yes, they
um,
have.
because,
They really have.
yeah, in part because of good warriors like yourself that have they've gotten better because of good patients like yourself. You
Yeah,
know, when we
let me talk about that
yeah,
a little bit. So the
sure.
first time through cancer, they didn't have CT scans, so I'm actually 55. You'd said 52. I'm actually 55 and was began treatment this year at age 55, and so I've been doing this for 41 years. When I was meeting my doctor this time, he said, I've been in oncology for 21 years. I said I've been an oncology patient for 41, and he laughed. He said, "You win." So the first time around, no CT scans, which means when they're staging you, they actually open you up. They actually took my spleen so they could stage me. They took my appendix. So now they just scan your body, put you in a machine, a half hour later, it's over. Then they opened you up, and it was a 2 week recovery just for the initial part of the recovery, and really a year long recovery from the abdominal surgery. In those days, when I received chemotherapy, I would receive a push rather than a drip. And so they would take a big tube of adriamycin and would push it into me, and a big tube of vincristine or Cytoxan, and push it into me. And at one point, my veins had been so deteriorated that the chemotherapy pooled under my arm and caused third-degree burns under the skin of my arm as the chemotherapy leaked into me. Radiation was broad-based radiation. There's none of this pinpoint radiation that they have now. It's broad-based radiation. There was no anti-nausea medicines. There was just item after item after item has changed. Now they do a drip. It's the chemotherapy is delivered a lot more easily. Anti-nausea medicines, they can stage you, and they can follow up on your staging and see if you truly are in remission or not in remission. So advances have been made, and one of the things I think it's important for people to know who are going through cancer is that medicine is outstanding, and I recognize those differences. This time when I was diagnosed, and to a lesser degree when I was 39 also, but this time certainly still, the doctors and nurses came and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry we found this, and I'm really, really terribly sorry." And I'm like, I felt like saying, "Come on, doc, this is the 21st century. Let's roll. I presume I have a good medical team. Let's have some confidence on this. Let's move forward and do what we need to do to address this thing." And so it's a big difference between then and now.
Well, I'm so grateful for all the advancements. And this is a nice segue. When we connected recently on the phone, I was just amazed at the abundance of gratitude that you have. Um, where do you think that comes from, given the hurdles that you've had to jump over in your life?
Yeah. So you express that as if I have gratitude despite the hurdles, and I don't. I think that it's actually the other way around, Matt. Um, I have gratitude because of the hurdles, because I know that life is challenging, that I can appreciate, um, the things that happen in life. I know that life is short, and I know that we all need to help each other. And so I'm really grateful for my wife, my family, my community who consistently comes in and supports me. The mission that God has given me to be able to help and support people. And so, and of course, I have good foundations in faith to support that as well. So I think I have a wonderful message to convey that isn't my message, but it's the one that the Bible gives us, that God gives us, that there is hope now, and that we have great relationship with the Creator of the universe, and we have great relationship with each other, and what's not to be joyful about, what's not to be grateful about.
We've got this show around gratitude, and if I peel back the onion just a little bit, my real goal is to inspire people to get to know Jesus Christ better, because I'm a believer that everything that we would potentially be grateful for really comes as a result or comes through Jesus Christ. And you've got a strong faith. You were born into a family, had a father that was a preacher, a mother that was reading you Bible verses. You already touched on her reading the story about Solomon. Was there ever a time during your cancer journey that your faith maybe was challenged in a way, or maybe you found yourself questioning that? And if so, how did you get the ship righted? And if not, what did you do to keep strong in faith during those challenging periods?
So Matt, I'll try to describe this, and so I read all the time, I watch all the time, I listen to apologetics, but I don't listen to them to convince myself or because I need evidences of the existence of God. And I can speak to apologetics and those sorts of things because I really am a guy who thinks about these things and enjoys them. To me, God's existence is overwhelming. I've never questioned it, but not because I'm not a questioning person. It's just so self-evident. That's number one. I think that it's self-evident. Number two, you have the luxury of questioning things when you're not in the fight. When you're in the fight, you better be dedicated to the fight. And that is everything that goes along with it. You better understand your mission, be clear on your mission, and move forward with your mission. That means physically be prepared. That means spiritually be prepared. And as we have said also, emotionally and mentally. And so there's really no time. You're running directly into the fire. I'm a veteran of the first Gulf War. I deployed to the Middle East 4 deployments. I was a Farsi linguist in the Navy, and when you go, there's no time to question. You go, and your training happens all before the fight. But if you're in the fight all the time, be prepared for it. And so, to some degree, I think that too much introspective questioning. I'm not saying don't be introspective. I'm not saying don't think about these things. Socrates said the unexamined life wasn't worth living, and I agree with that. Notwithstanding, don't spend too much time, because it's kind of narcissistic, trying to reduce God to your size so that you can comprehend the incomprehensible. If you can comprehend the incomprehensible, then that's a self-defeating argument. How can you do that? And so recognize what's around you and then carry that with you to satisfy your mission.
Jonathon, I'm glad you brought up your service of our country, and thank you for that. I failed to mention that on the front end. You're a very resilient individual, clearly. Was any of that resilience trained in the military or reinforced in the military, or what did the military help you in terms of just dealing with life?
Matt, when you go into the military, um, you you don't have good self-actualization before you go into the military. People are either overly nice or overly critical, or they don't give you the feedback that you need one way or the other. When you go into the military, you're going to be faced with very real situations. And so from day one in boot camp, they test you, they push you, and you begin to figure out who you are. And then your buddies in the military, one of the reasons why military has trouble communicating, or maybe why we gravitate to one another after the military, is because we are blatantly honest with each other and harsh with each other. But we aren't harsh because we don't love each other. We're harsh because we do love each other. And so, we talk trash with each other, and trash talk always has an element of truth to it. And it always has an element where you're building each other up. So you're always tearing each other down and always building each other up. And so you begin to think that's funny, and you do it to each other. And and it really builds relationship over the long period of time. And so, and then they test you with reality. So you go through a lot of training, and then you get tested with reality, and that is when you go into conflict. And so at the end of the conflict, you realize, you know what, I can handle a lot, and I am capable of managing this. And you go in with confidence, and frankly, you think you can do just about anything.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'd like to move, if we could, Jonathan, to your most recent uh, fight with cancer. And, you shared with me the regimen that you were on, and it was very, I would say, just intimidating with respect to what you had to go through. And maybe share with our listening audience um, what you heard the protocol would be as you were administered the treatment that you needed to get in order to get well.
Matt, I've been having some health problems before I was diagnosed. I wasn't able to digest food. That was getting progressively worse. My wife and I went out of country for a board meeting. I was supposed to be there for a week. After the first night, actually, I said, okay, we're going to have to go back home tomorrow and go to the emergency room. She said, oh, thank goodness, which made me laugh because she knew already. She was waiting for me to come to the decision. And so I went to the board meeting the next morning, gave my presentation, and then we got on a plane, flew back home, drove directly to the emergency room. They took me in, and they found the tumor. The surgical team was put in place immediately. They said, you can maybe wait a couple of weeks on this. I said, nope, let's go ahead and hit it. And I went into the emergency room at 1:30 a.m. Wednesday morning. By Friday, I had a surgery on Thursday, the next day, and by Friday, I had the major surgery, removed 12.5 centimeters of my intestines, removed the major tumor. I was in stage 4A. That we treated it by chemotherapy as if it were stage 2, because it was localized, but it involved an organ, so I staged at stage 4. Um, and and it took them a little time took them almost a month to get the pathology back, to tell me what kind of cancer it was, which was Burkitt's lymphoma, which is an aggressive B cell lymphoma, very aggressive B cell lymphoma, in fact. And they said we need to treat quickly on this because this will invade your body very quickly. So one of the things I'll tell people is when you have things going wrong with your health, get into the doc and make sure that there's a thorough examination. Very well, so advocate for yourself and have your family advocate for you, and you advocate for your family too. Um, as a sideline to that, I lost my sister to cancer in 2018, and we did not get her into the doctor quickly enough, and that's part of the reason why she passed away. Um, but so they said the treatment protocol will be called DA EPOC R, and the DA portion of that is dose adjusted, and then the EPOC is the chemotherapy, and the R is Rituxan, which is an immunotherapy. And so the protocol was I would be in the hospital for 5 days. for chemotherapy. I had 4 20-hour bags and then one bag that was about an hour and a half. And then I would be out of the hospital for the immunotherapy one day, the Rituxan. Then have 2 weeks and then I'd go back and do it again. So I was on a 3-week cycle. And so every 3 weeks I was in the hospital for 5 days, out of the hospital for one day, getting treatment, and then recovery for 2 weeks. And each time I received chemotherapy, if I handled it well, they would increase the amount of chemotherapy. That's the dosage adjusted. And so by the end, I was receiving treatment that there was only one person who was had received that this doctor had given, that had received a higher dose of chemotherapy than what I had. And by all accounts, I don't want anyone to think it's overly heroic. By all accounts, I handled it well. It deteriorated me badly. There's a lot of bad physical deterioration associated with it, but that's all just part of the treatment.
Well, along all of that, you somehow, I'd love to hear how this came up in your head, but you decided to walk a marathon while you're in the hospital, the last treatment. How did that, even get incubated in your head? Number one, and tell us what that walk was like as you walked 26.2 miles in the hospital.
Matt, this is the gratitude podcast, and I think part of gratitude is encouragement. I think it's one of the most important things that we can do for each other. I think that the world is filled with negative voices speaking to us all of the time, saying you can't do something or you shouldn't do something. And I think if you're grateful that you want to encourage others too, you want to share that, you want them to have successful lives, and you want to put your shoulder not only behind what you're doing but behind what they're doing. And life is just so short, and there's so much. One of my favorite quotes is from David Cassidy on his deathbed. David Cassidy was a singer from the 70s, a teen pop star. And his dying words was so much wasted time. And I would hate for that to be the dying words for any of us. When you are in the hospital, there's only so much that you can do, and yet this cancer has given me a good platform to encourage other people. The nurses who were around me, they've gone through COVID, they've gone through long shifts and a declining workforce around them, and yet they stick in there. They're the hands of God there. You have people who in my community, I know, greater Cincinnati, and everywhere, but people certainly who I thought I'd be able to reach in my community in Cincinnati, who people tell them they can't do something or shouldn't do something. And I thought, you know what? I'm going through cancer. I have chemotherapy. I'm in the hospital for 5 days straight. My hemoglobin counts are low, which means very low, which means my body isn't absorbing oxygen well. Everything I do is like walking at altitude, like on the top of Mount Everest. Top of Mount Everest, you have about a third of the oxygen you do at sea level. My hemoglobin was at half of the normal level, so my body's carrying half the normal oxygen. My muscles are deteriorating badly. I have neuropathy in my arms, my hands, my feet. My toenails are breaking off. I'm lightheaded. Okay, so here I am. What am I going to do? Doc said that the record for walking in that ward was 13,000 steps, about 6.5 miles. So the first time I went into the hospital, I said, okay, I'll break your record. So I went 10 miles. And then the next time I went in the hospital, I walked 13.1 miles, a half marathon. And after I got done with that, I thought, you know what? Walking half a marathon is like taking half a shower. I'm a little embarrassed by that. And so I decided to walk a full marathon, and I decided that I would try to raise some money for some organizations, which there honestly wasn't enough time to put all that to put the fundraising portion of that together. But I invited people throughout the country um, who to walk with me, and they supported me and they loved me, and so I had people from around the country walking with me. And so I started at 4:30 in the morning, and I had a friend who came and walked the first 6.5 or 7 miles with me before work, and then I walked throughout the day. I was pulling my IV stand along with me, and just walking back and forth. The hallway is 261 feet, so back and forth is 522 feet. Plus, I would make sure that I walked a couple extra feet on each end with a broad turn, so that I could have a full tenth of a mile with each lap. And then I just walked the marathon. And like anything else, Matt, it's one step at a time. And no matter what, no matter whether you're tired, no matter whether you're hurting, no matter whether you're strong or weak, this is your path, right? And so you go out and you walk that marathon. And and you know, uh, I walk that marathon in a day. I tell people that they walk the marathons of their lives every day. That my marathon was ended with that day. But I so much respect those nurses because they wake up every day and they walk it every day. And I want people to walk the marathons of their lives. I want them to know that they are fully capable, that they are strong, that they are creatures of God, that they have purpose, they have meaning. And don't tell me you can't do something. You can do something. Don't paint yourself in a circle of incapacity. You are capable of anything.
You mentioned that you had friends come from around the country to be there, support you, walk with you. You also had NBC News catch wind of the story, and they came and reported that. What was it like having the lights on as you walked this marathon in the hospital?
Well, in the ward that I was in, they really don't let very many people up there because I was in the bone marrow transplant ward. So our rooms are positive pressure rooms to keep infections out, and we have people who are truly immune compromised. I guess myself too, um, all around, and so after I have 6 days of chemotherapy, 5 in the hospital, 1 out. So the footage came from family members who filmed that on iPhones. Then Natalie Clark came and did an interview on the day, my outpatient day, after I got finished up, literally right after I got out of my last treatment. And so that was on a Monday. My walk had been on the Thursday before that. And but she came and she interviewed me, and as with this interview, you wish you could express yourself more clearly uh, and fully. Uh, but I expressed myself as well as I could. She interviewed me. It was a pleasant interview. I spoke with her and the cameraman for a while after that because everyone has their challenges and everyone has things that they need to think about. And so they shared with me loved ones and friends who were going through cancer. And so we had a chance to share. And so that was a really important time too. And then the next thing you know, not only is it showing in Cincinnati and our local markets, but the NBC network picked it up it was on People Magazine and a lot of cities around the country. And so I was very honored to be able to do that.
That's unbelievable. You touched on the nurses and strong support from your wife Julie. I've long said as I walk this journey that I'm on today that oftentimes the most difficult position to be in is to be the caregiver of a cancer patient. And I'd love to hear what your wife Julie has been like and what the journey's been like for her and how she supported you. Because oftentimes the support system doesn't get, I think, the right recognition in being the warriors that they are.
Matt, I've always thought that being the cancer patient was the easy side of this. for me, I've always known that as long as I was loved, it would be okay. I didn't know whether to live or die, but I knew that if I was loved, it was okay. I'm the only breadwinner for our house. Julia raises our kids. Uh, um, I have two children who are freshmen in college, and I have two children who are still at home, Sophie, who is 16, and Nathan, who is 12. And so we need to raise them and raise them well. So if I don't survive this, then they lose the breadwinner. They lose dad, who still has a lot of they still need to help mature the kids and grow them. And so Julia has to face this thing with a lot of courage. So she has to take care of her husband, who is in the hospital. She has to take care of the family. We have to make sure that our family stays positively motivated, and we have to maintain consistency. She and we really didn't talk about it by saying, okay, we realize we have to do these things. We just both know it. So some days she was with me in the hospital, and some days she was not with me in the hospital. And that is hard to do when your loved one's in the hospital, to not be there. But we both know that that's the right thing, because we're not about just focusing on ourselves or consuming. We're about making sure that we accomplish the things that we need to accomplish, and serve the people who we need to serve. And so she kept things going at a stable level. When I couldn't, 5 days in the hospital, that's 5 days when I'm not home. And when I am home, I'm weaker than usual. And at the same time, she knows who I am. So, for example, when I decided to do this marathon, she doesn't grab a hold of reins and pull me back, because then I would have to move forward myself, doing what I think I ought to be doing through my sickness, and pull her along too when she'd be pulling against me. She doesn't do that. She says, okay. And then she supports what I decided to do. Kind of like when we were overseas, she knew what needed to be done, but she waited for me to make that decision. And I'm not saying that she doesn't encourage me or discourage me or put her voice in. She does, but she makes sure that she is doing the right things to move both me and what we think we ought to be doing forward.
Do you think behind closed doors she walks out of that room and she kind of closes her eyes and probably says, "Oh my gosh, here's Jonathon at it again"?
Oh man, she thinks I'm a nut. Are you kidding me? She knows, but she knows who I am too. And so,
yeah, that's awesome. Jonathon, my listening audience, we've had good friend of mine, Roy Von Tama, on. He wrote a book, Healing Before You're Cured. He talks about the 4 houses of health. It's your mental health, your physical health, your spiritual health, and your emotional health. I was amazed when we connected that you talked about, in order to be properly prepared for any hurdle, you specifically touched on those houses. You didn't call them houses of health, but you talked about your spiritual well-being, your emotional well-being, your physical well-being, and your mental well-being. Where did that come from, or where did you learn to think about wellness in those departments?
I don't know that I learned it like from a third-party source, though. I was amazed when you brought that up to me before. I experienced it, and I recognized it. So my journey on this one, Matt, has been a cancer journey, but I don't want to isolate any of this to just being cancer. That just happened to be the challenge that I was faced with, and that happens to be the story that I went through at this time. But I think this notion of being prepared for crisis is a universal story. And so, and the time to prepare for crisis is not when you're going through crisis. You can still develop yourself while you're going through crisis. And so if you haven't prepared, you still need to do your best. But the time to prepare for crisis is ahead of time. You need to live a life that is stable in all circumstances, through good times and bad times. And so I was riding with my son Nathan, and was 12 years old, and I wanted to express those things with him. And so we were riding in the truck to the grocery store and talking about cancer. And I told him, look, I mean, crisis comes in everyone's life. It comes in all kinds of forms, but you need to be prepared for that. Don't think you live this imaginary life, this perfect life. None of us live the perfect life. And we have to do what we do despite that. We're not entitled to that, and you're not going to get it, and you'll be disappointed in life if that's what your expectation is. But to be prepared for life, then you need to be physically prepared. So I reached over and I touched his arm and held his, thin little 12-year-old arm, and said, you need to be physically prepared. So you need to become strong. You need to make sure that your nutrition is good, because when things happen, you will be physically taxed. And then I touched his head. So you need to be mentally prepared so that you're smart, you're aware, you keep your wits about you, you don't panic, and you learn things, and you have yourself well contextualized, which is to say, you're not entitled to a perfect life. You're entitled to the life that you're given, and it's expected that you will use that to your best. And guess what? You're capable of doing it too. You need to be emotionally prepared. And so I used my fingertips and touched over his heart and said, you need to be emotionally prepared. Don't wallow in self-pity. Understand that life is still great and you have a lot of great things. And so don't let your emotions get the best of you. And then I spread my hand across his chest and said, you need to be spiritually prepared, because you need to know that this life isn't the only life, that we have the promise of eternity with God, and you need to be confident in that. And that confidence gives you what you need in order to accomplish great things in life. And so those things, when I typed it on my Facebook page and shared it with other people, really had its roots in my advice to my son.
That's very well said. Very well said. And I've often thought that, like you, those departments or houses of health, however you want to say it, can be, utilized for any hurdle that you're facing, or prepare yourself for any hurdle. It's not just cancer, even though Roy wrote a book around healing before you're cured. I was amazed when we connected. You discussed being in the cancer fight and not being a choice. You are a cancer warrior. You're not just in it. What do you think determines, or what are the factors that you've seen through other patients that you've met in their own cancer journey that determines whether somebody's truly a warrior or they're just in the fight?
So when throughout my cancer experiences, you hear people say, somebody passes away and they say they fought to the end, and you hear people say, stay in the fight, that kind of thing. And that, as phrased, that's never rang quite true to me. I think there is, when you're a cancer patient, you really don't have a choice about being in the fight. You're not staying in the fight. You're not making a choice. You are in the fight. And so I've thought a lot about this issue of staying in the fight versus being in the fight. I brought the matter to a couple of SEAL friends of mine, both of whom are officers, and one of whom is very battle tested. I said, okay, the SEALs have an ethos of, I am never out of the fight. Can you talk to me about your thoughts on the difference between staying in the fight and being in the fight? One of them said, look, I really don't like the phrase, I am never out of the fight, because we, in fact, a lot of times are. We make choices on terrain and circumstances and relative strengths and mission dynamics. And there are a lot of times when we're out of the fight, and we should be, he said. The other one said, look, I think it's more of something that um, when you're actually in the fight, never count yourself out. Um, and and uh, I I think that there's a big difference between staying in the fight when there's a choice. When you're a cancer patient, you don't have a choice to get out of the fight because of terrain or because of circumstances or because of odds or anything like that. You don't have a choice. You're in the fight. And so you don't make choices of saying, I'm not going to do this one way or the other. It's a matter of you must become a warrior. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called David and Goliath. And in that book, he drew this analogy. He said, look, don't, don't, don't underestimate David's advantages. He was small. He was deft. He used asymmetric warfare. He picked up a stone and threw it at Goliath rather than using the traditional spear and sword. And he was making an analogy with small businesses. Small businesses have the opportunity to be deft, and you should take a look at your advantages. I think it's a great analogy, and I think it was a great book. I really enjoyed reading it. I own a small business myself, but with regard to the analogy of David, I don't think he got it right. Number one, David knew that God was with him all the time. And so he didn't advance his fight because he thought he had strategic advantages. He advanced his fight because he knew God was with him. Number two, Saul and David's brothers and the entire army of Israel, any one of them could have walked down that hill and could have faced Goliath, but they didn't. They thought they had a choice. And so the fight was something that they were doing, not something that they were. But when David showed up, he said, look, I've fought the lion, I have fought the bear, and God has been with me. Who is this man who defies the armies of God? And he walked out, and he was a warrior. It wasn't a matter of what he did. It was a matter of who he was. And what I want to encourage people to do is to be a warrior. Don't just get in the fight. Be in the fight. And I can't tell you what the fight is in your life. It may be crisis. It may be opportunity. And it's usually both. And so get out. Know who you are. Don't doubt who you are. You are made for battle. You are a warrior. Be that.
Listening audience, you are listening to a warrior himself, Jonathon Sams. It's such an honor to have you on today's show. As we wrap up, Jonathon, I have one last final question to ask, and it's one. Clearly, you have had your own hurdles to face and directly with cancer. I'd love to hear your perspective. You've already talked about you've used the word gratitude on what you learned through your cancer journey, starting at the age of 14 years old. But is there anything, and it could be your cancer journey, but is there any particular hurdle, cancer or something else, that happened in your life that, had it not happened, you wouldn't be the warrior that you are today, and you wouldn't be as resilient, you wouldn't be the father, you wouldn't be the attorney, you wouldn't be the loved one, you wouldn't be the friend that you are today had that not happened? And if it's cancer, that's fine, but I'd love to hear your perspective on a life hurdle that you had to face and how it helped you grow into the man that you are today.
I think there have been a lot of life hurdles. I've referred to some of them, whether going to war or being involved in cancer or any number of other personal challenges. And those certainly refine you and give you clarity and confidence. As important, if not more important, are the people who come into your life. And so making sure that you surround yourself with great people is important. My friend Mike Kelly is a spiritual mentor, and he challenges me, and I challenge him consistently to pursue lives of purpose, to always focus on purpose. My friend John Sanchez, he is a constant encourager. He is an encourager to his core. And so I try to emulate that and learn not just the morality of it, but the technique of it. And so I'm a student of purpose, and I am a student of encouragement. And I will never be as strong as what my mentors are in those areas, because they do it naturally and I do it by discipline. but I still pursue those things. So the things I would encourage your audience to do is to surround themselves with great people who speak positively, who have purpose in life themselves, that pursue it. And also, Matt, if I could bring this up, because I think this being the gratitude podcast, this is, my comments on gratitude and crisis and all related issues. I tell my kids that attitude is everything. It's not something, it is everything. A good attitude can turn a bad situation into a good situation. A bad attitude will turn a good situation into a bad situation. But as I thought about it, this is actually the middle of the target, but it's not absent of the continuum, because you can't have a good attitude unless you're grateful. You have to have gratitude. If you think that, and that only happens if you don't feel entitled. If you feel entitled to everything around you, oh, I deserve to have a good job. Oh, I deserve to have a perfect life. Then you aren't getting things because you're working for them. You think you're entitled to it. And as a result of that, you aren't grateful for it. If you're entitled to something, then how can you possibly be grateful? This is just something I deserve. And if you don't have gratitude, then you won't have a good attitude, because you'll say, hey, look, I deserve this. I'm not grateful for it. And so why would I have a good attitude? And by the way, you can never have success because you never have to work for anything. If you're entitled to it, then you never work for it. And so you're actually never successful. And if you're never successful, you're never happy. And so gratitude is right at the center of that. You need to understand that what's there you're not entitled to, but what's there you should be grateful for. And then that will give you a great attitude, and it'll give you the opportunity to feel self-satisfied when you accomplish something, and that in turn will help you to feel happy. And so that's a continuum. It's not just a single item on this. You have to have that continuum of gratitude, attitude, a sense of not having self-entitlement, and then a sense of accomplishment and happiness.
That is so perfect. That is so perfect. Jonathon, thanks so much for being on today's show. I know you don't like being called an inspiration. You are, but at the same time, you're certainly encouraging others to live to their fullest and continue to do that. Your faith is amazing and it's unwavering. And I love how you have reinforced the importance of being mentally strong, emotionally strong, physically strong, and spiritually strong. I wish you continued success as you move beyond this most recent cancer hurdle, and I hope that you get full clearance of disease here. Jonathon, you are amazing. It's so great to get acquainted with you, and I look forward to staying in touch as we walk the cancer walk that we're on. Listening audience, you've heard this from me before. I think about three things each and every day that help me keep the wheels on the track. The first of which is, find the courage to be grateful, regardless of how powerful your storm is. Secondly, be present to those you're with. You'd be amazed at the gifts that are right in front of you if you just open your eyes and are aware of who's sitting right in front of you. And lastly, pay attention to how you're feeding your mind, your body, and your soul. Today's guest was Jonathon Sams. If today's conversation inspired you in some way, shape, or form, subscribe to the show, comment on the show, and share it with others. Until next time, with gratitude, listeners, find the courage to be grateful, regardless of how powerful your storm is. Godspeed, my friends.